This is obviously being recorded, so please no cursing. Obviously, you guys know this is the course. The FIG code of points, when you download this PowerPoint, when you have it, if you don't know how to get the FIG code of points, it's there. I also send it to you about 1,000,000 times, so it's available almost everywhere. One of the things that we are interested in moving, and this really is created by the need, the way that we've changed the way you record events now, and the way you come up with the D score. You need to have some grasp on symbols. That's why I'd like you to pick 1 or 2 events that you can learn symbols on so that you can run our meets, right? Here's the deal. On Pommel Horse, you don't need to know the symbol for a Busnari, right? It's unlikely you will ever see that in a JO meet, right? You don't have to typically go too much beyond D skills, because they can't do D skills. The way, as you see, the events are now required to be composed, they only have 7 tricks, right? 7 skills that count, right? The 7 highest skills. I don't want to steal the thunder from that, but because of that requirement now, instead of it being 10 skills or 9 skills, now there's 2 less tricks, right? And to get the element groups, one of the element groups has to be in those 7. So routines are going to be shorter. They're going to be actually maybe simpler, which, quite frankly, I think that is good for JO guys. They're only going to do things that they are better prepared and able to do aesthetically and safely. So that might be a good thing for us. We won't know until the events start rolling through how that plays out, but that's the deal. So you need to understand a little bit about symbols, right? They're really not difficult. I started learning symbols, FIG symbols, just this summer. Because it actually was, there were questions on the FIG practical, on the written part, that were symbol questions, right? So you had, but they were just very basic kinds of things. So they weren't that difficult to do, right? So again, think about them. You can come up with your own symbols if you want, right? If there's a skill and you can't figure out what symbol to use, ask one of us, right? Sometimes I don't use their skills. I don't use their symbols because it doesn't register in my head, right? So do what you got to do, right? But try to learn some of those basic symbols. It will make your life much easier as you're learning. It also lines you up for much bigger events, because bigger events don't want you there unless you can do symbols, right? They never say FIG symbols. They say you have to be able to do symbols. Okay? This is really a change over the, 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. Nobody gave a shit about symbols, right? I'm recording, and I said no cursing, and I did it. I broke my own rule. But anyhow, so you understand my point. Symbols are becoming something that's a little bit more point. There is actually, again, you can click on this when you get the PowerPoint. You can click on, there's a symbols booklet, right? It's available, so you can download that. The JO program and the national program have some discrepancies, right? They differ in respect. There are times in a JO meet where we're going to allow warm-ups in between, right? There'll be touches, right? You'll hear all of us that have been around for a while saying, oh, is this a girls' meet or a guys' meet? Why do we have to have touches, right? We're men, we shouldn't need touches. But with bigger and bigger skills that are done by some, I think it's important that we start to kind of lighten up on that attitude and understand that there will be touches, right? But it's not a never-ending warm-up, right? If there is a touch, if there's a warm-up, 30 seconds is what every guy gets. That's it, Except for P-bars, you get 50 seconds, right? So we don't want to belabor this point, but we need to give them opportunities, but we also have to control it, or we're going to be there all day, right? We don't get paid by the hour, we get paid by the guy, right? So does us no good to be there 15 hours if you're not getting paid by the hour, right? So we want the meet to continue on. As far as general penalty things, right? Behavioral issues, right? Behavioral errors made by the gymnast have a 3/10 deduction. If it's related to the apparatus, it's 5/10. And we have a series of those things that they talk about, right? Attire violations, right? We'll define this a little bit later when we get to the JO stuff, right? But there are defined. You know, if they don't acknowledge you at the beginning and end, that's a behavioral error, right? If you exceed, we're going to talk about falls in detail because that rule has changed from last year. So we have to talk about that rule change. And again, we'll do that when we get to the FIG things. These things are more the apparatus thing. There's no spotter, right? They have an illegal use of the mats, right? Doesn't happen very often in guys stuff, but it from time to time happens. So these are those 5/10 deductions. And we don't need to worry about it for this course, right? For what we're going to do here, but we need to talk about those things. So, talk about the actual routine construction. There's something called the D score. This is a sidebar. Nobody that runs the meets understands this terminology, all right? The D score is nothing more than the difficulty, the element groups, and any connection. That's the D score. Right? You add those things up, and that's how you get a D score. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The E score starts at 10, and that's where you take deductions for execution, etc. Right? So the D score is the start value. So most meets that I'm at, I make sure I go to the start table and I figure out what they actually want us to write down. Right? You got to put something into the machine, right? Or you got to flash something. Well, what do you want us to flash? They'll say, oh, we want the start value. Well, they think the start value is the D score plus the E score. But as judges, we know that's not correct. The start value is just the D score. So we have to make sure, because if you put in the wrong numbers into the electronic thing, obviously garbage in, garbage out. Right? You don't get the right score. So we just have to be aware that most people that run the meets are not aware that there are a couple of different definitions that are not being properly used by these folks. So let's talk a little bit about the general rules, right? And this is just an application of the new rule for the JO program, right? In the FIG code for seniors, you need 9 skills and a dismount. For all JO events, they need 7 skills and a dismount. How you do the D score, the difficulty piece, you find the 7 highest skills and the dismount. That's what counts for the D score. The issue before this is, what would you do if you had these 8 skills and one of the element groups was not in the top 8? So let's say that the 9th skill is in element group 2, like on parallel bars. It was a front uprise. They did that, right? Last year, we'd say, okay, well, I'm not going to give them credit for this B, so they lose 2 tenths, but they get 5 tenths because they have an element group. So the net effect was they went up 3 tenths, right? Now, the element groups have to be in those top skills, right? So this is going to require guys either to water down their routines, which for a lot of them we would be hopeful that they would do that, or they're going to have to increase the value of their element groups, right? And Bob was talking about this last night. Parallel bars is problematic, right? Because what are the B-level front uprise skills or back uprise skills, right? You got to do back uprise, quick catch, straight arm, right? I mean, there just aren't many of them. So how are they going to do that? I mean, they have to bring the value down so it's in the top 7, right? Now, if there's a tie, right? There's an A group 2 and an A group 3, and you got to pick one. You pick the one that benefits the gymnast, so they get the element group, right? But it's when it's not included in that top 7. That's why symbols have now become more important, right? You have to be able to write down what they did because you're going to have to pick, right? The beginning part of the season, optional sessions are going to be long because it's going to take us time to get through the stuff that coaches are showing us because they're not going to know the rules. And it's going to take us time to analyze it. I mean, not all of them, right? But some coaches are going to have difficulty making this change, right? Every coach in Ohio knows about this course, right? And tell you they're not all here, right?
Well, they used to come.
It would have been nice if they could have been here to get this information. But so that's okay, but the point is, they're going to start out. So this is just all about that thing. And again, I don't want to beat this in the ground. I think we've gone through it. You just have to remember, of whatever skills have to be done, the element groups have to be within those skills. And hopefully, as we go through this routine, we'll figure that out. Difficulty goes up to H's. I thought they said there's some I skills now. I'm not 100% certain, but I think there's some I's.
Stretched,
Double twisting. So
yeah.
yeah. There you go. All right. So obviously they go up in increments, right? You can repeat skills. They just don't count, right? I mean, you could do 5 double backs on floor if you wanted to, but you only get credit for 1, right? There's no deduction for doing more, right? Except for execution, right? So you can do as many things as you want, but you only get credit for 1. In the JO code, we have an exception for this next statement about things that aren't in the code of points, right? We still have this rule. I don't really like it all that much, but there's a rule that basically, if it is a gymnastics element, right, it is an A skill, but no element group, right? For years, we've been trying to get this more clearly defined, right? As the season progresses and we see how guys are progressing skill-wise, I always create a sheet. So when I go to a meet, I know if I'm on floor, I know exactly what I'm going to call an A no element group. Because there's only like 6 things I would even consider. In fact, there's not even that much, maybe 4 things on floor, right? There are just some things that don't cut the mustard, right? A forward roll on the floor. I mean, if you can do that in a bar without drinking, it shouldn't be a gymnastics A, right? Well, just because you can't do it anymore. All right?
I get after a few beers.
Every event has 4 element groups, right? One of which is always the dismount. The 2 exceptions to that are obviously vault and floor. Floor only has 3 element groups. But a dismount has to come from element group or 2 or 3. And again, I think I just stole some of Justin's free X thunder. Okay? So we know that there are 4 element groups. Each one is worth 0.5, right? With the exception of dismount, they're either there or they're not there. They either get 0.5 or they get nothing. There are some differences in dismounts. We'll talk about how dismounts, in fact, that's this slide. There are dismounts that are illegitimate. We never see those, right? I've never seen most of these before. we are worried about difficulty. The JO rules are totally different with respect to difficulty. So let's wait till we get there so you'll understand that there are differences in what's required for different levels at the JO level for the dismount. But again, these are just things that just kind of get us the general rules thing. There are some connection skills. The only connection skills that we have are on floor and high bar. It's the only place where we can connect skills. We have to obviously keep track of those things. In general, as long as there's no large error, they will get connection. Right? This also applies to JO bonuses, right? Unless there's a large error, and then even most of the time when you do that, they will not get the bonus, right? But the JO level, the general rule is, if they do it, they get the bonus. You can deduct whatever you want, but they get the bonus in general. So again, some of these things are more event-specific things. As you look down through the code, I think it's important, whatever event you're on, you understand what are those skills that are not recognized, right? On parallel bars is one of the best examples, right? On parallel bars, if you're doing a giant swing or a peach skill, one of those underbar skills, as a JO person, you're allowed to swing backwards, not do a handstand, swing back and bail or do that element group 2 or 3 skill, or group 3 skill. Okay? That's a part of no value. That's a half a swing, right? It's an empty swing. JO, you're allowed to do that. So it's important for you to understand what things are permitted on your event and what things are not permitted on the event. Right? These slides here obviously help you understand some of those elements that they just don't count. Right? They're not recognized. And as I said, we all know the JO makes up their own rules. So there's some things that we have exceptions on. The E-jury, again, kind of going through these things hopefully fairly quickly, because we shouldn't spend a lot of time. We want to understand this is all about the execution stuff, right? Deducting. You can't deduct more than 10 points. You may want to, but you cannot deduct more than 10 points from execution, right? Again, there's rules that I'm still trying to figure out how we're going to apply the rules, and as we go through the events, hopefully those will become very apparent that historically we don't have people to do those things. So one being timing floor. JO floor, optional floor is
It's time.
it's timed now.
50 to 70 seconds.
Are compulsories timed?
No.
They're pretty short. They never come close. But anyhow, the deductions: small, medium, large. It's 1, 3, and 5. Right? Until you get to a higher level, you never have to worry about anything other than that. It's 1, 3, and 5. Okay? The distinction is either an angle, right? When you take the test, I've always tried to figure out how they're going to ask this question on a test, because I give tests and I've been taking tests all my life. But, if it's minor, that's small, right? If it's distinct or significant, that's medium. If it's major, if it's extreme, right, that's big, right? That's how you understand on a test when they ask those questions. That's how you get the right answer, right? The point is, in the end, we have to understand it's just 1, 3, 5, right? So let's kind of talk out of school just for a second, right? At the JO level, right? Some of these kids are not good, right? They are going to be struggling, right? You cannot write fast enough for some of the crap that happens in these events, right? It's just not physically possible. Okay? That's a cross we have to bear, right? But here's the issue, because I think this is, in the end, this is a very important thing for us to think about. Let's think globally what happens. So we get to a meet, a big meet, and there's some really good kids, right? And they make small errors. But because they're so good, we see those small errors, right? And we deduct for them, right? Then another kid comes up and he is not good at all. And I cannot write fast enough to write all that crap down. So there are those small errors that the other guy, he's not getting deducted because I can't write all that stuff down. What that does is it compresses our scores, right? So it really brings the bad guys up closer to the good guys, right? That is a problem, right? Mostly because parents don't understand that, right? But from another, because we have judges that have different levels of expertise. Some guys will be able to write more stuff down than others because they've been doing it for a lot longer, right? So what happens when the guy got last week he scored a 9.2, and this week he scores a 7.5, right? As judges and hopefully coaches understand the score really isn't all that important. It's where who gets the medals, right? I mean, scores don't carry over. We don't qualify for anything, right? So it isn't, but parents don't get that crap, right? They say, Johnny got a 9.2 last week. This actually looked better than last week. Why did he get a 7.5? Well, because this week you got a good judge, right? I mean, you can't say that, but that's sort of the way it works, right? So as judges, as a guy that is the meet director at the regional meet, this is very problematic at that meet. Because all these guys are the better guys, and now we have this stretching of scores. We have better judges typically, right? The best judges, and these guys write a lot more crap down. So, I mean, it is not, I mean, I get shit from parents all the time. It's like, Jesus, his score's 1.5 points lower than it was last week at the state meet. How's that possible? Well, I don't even know who the judge at the state meet was, right? It's possible the judge is in a different place. The routine wasn't exactly this. I mean, there's lots of reasons for that to be different, but they don't see any of that crap, right? So what does that mean for us? It really doesn't, I mean, if we're doing our job, it doesn't mean anything for us,
Yeah,
right?
we should still be able to put them in the order of the.
But see, parents don't get that. Because parents are paying hundreds of dollars a month for their kid to be trained, and they see inconsistency at the meets. Parents don't want their kids to get screwed. They don't want to spend $200-300 a month and then have their kid go to a meet and then pay another $100-150 for them to be at the meet and then end up having them get what they perceive as getting screwed over, right? To me, that's the biggest challenge in judging, is to try to be consistent from week to week. We can do that within our state. I would think we should be able to do that. Within the region, it becomes much more difficult. Okay? I mean, there are states, we won't mention them, but there are states that think they are right and they judge very difficult. They don't understand the impact of that, right? It's a problem, right? So again, just want us to kind of understand that there are some very deep issues that we want the sport to be around. It's a great sport. We have to have these things in mind. Here's the change in the fall rule, okay? If a guy falls, and if you watch the international meets, you'll see this. If a guy falls off of high bar, he does not stand up. You do not count time until they get to their feet.
Sam McCulloch did it at P&G.
So literally,
He had several chances to show off that new rule.
he could crawl to the chalk tray, reach up, chalk, and he gets the fall, right? But when is the routine actually over? right? He gets 30 seconds, right? No, he actually gets a full minute. At the end of 30 seconds, if he doesn't get up and start by that time, you have to wait and see what he does. Because if he actually gets another 30 seconds to mount. You take 3 more tenths off, but he gets another 30 seconds. At the end of a minute, he's done. Right? So this is, we have guys in our region who compete in the elite, international kind of stages, and guys that are JO. Right? And in the last couple of years, these 2 fall rules have been different. Right? I mean, I've had guys fall, and I say, oh, you got 30 seconds, and the coach says, wait a minute, he is not up yet. And they go, this is JO, this is not international, this is JO. He's got to get up, right? So there's some, now it's all the same, okay? But it's different. Young guys are not going to get this at all. They're going to fall, they're going to want to stand up. The upper level guys that are better trained, these are the guys we have to keep in mind, because this rule is going to apply to those guys that fall, right? Are we okay with that? Cool. Obviously, you know, there were angular deductions. It's up to you to understand these things. We're not going to beat this into the ground, right? But there are angular deviations for most strength and hold parts, right? Whatever the position is, it has to be perfect. Anything not perfect has a deduction, and then it's angles from there. Some press moves. This becomes important on rings. We'll wait till I do it on rings, and we'll talk that. But how you deduct for the angles in the rings is different, right? There are different rules for how you apply, especially combining skills, strength skills on rings. Swinging skills. Again, there are angular deductions, but in this case, you don't have to be perfect. You get 15 degrees free. Then it starts 15-degree angles. Okay? So again, these are rules that hopefully we gather and we learn over time. The distinction between, well, they were 14 degrees versus they were 16 degrees. I don't know who the hell can do that, right? We're called judges for a reason. There's a certain amount of subjectivity to what you see and what you write down, right? Hopefully you don't mistake a 1/10 deduction and call it a 5/10 deduction. That's a little bit extreme, but it happens, right? Okay, let's talk a little bit about landings, right? Obviously you need to land with your feet slightly apart. That's okay. But in the end, your heels have to come together, and you cannot move your toes. So the toes, wherever they are, they cannot move. If they move, it is not a stick. Okay? So you land, bring your heels together, boom, you're good. What if you land with your feet slightly apart and you pick up your feet, moving them together? Well, if you move your toes, that's a deduction, right? What happens if you land with your feet slightly apart and you just leave them apart? That's a deduction. The point is, and Bob told me this, and I just haven't said the rule. The rule now is 1 foot. That's what Bob says. This doesn't say 1 foot. It's shoulder width, right? I haven't seen the rule, so I don't want to say that's true. So what we know right now, it's 1 foot apart.
It's newsletter 54. It's in
I don't have that. So 1 foot apart. Shoulder width, if it's more than shoulder width. I don't see how a guy can bring his heels together if his feet are shoulder width apart. Those are some big freaking toes, right? Those are big feet, right? But again, if it's wider than shoulder width apart, or if you pick up 1 foot, or if you just don't bring them together, again, shoulder width, 3/10. Okay? Layaways, empty swings, right? And these things are event specific, right? What is a layaway on rings versus parallel bars versus high bar, right? If that's your event, you need to know that. right? It's in the code. You got to read the code for that event to know what those things, specific things are for those events. Pommel horse is problematic, right? Swinging to a handstand, everybody wants to do it, right? Lots of guys try. There are some important rule changes with respect to this, but that's Tom's bailiwick. I'll let him discuss that in a little bit more detail. But we do have to understand that if your legs come down, right, if you're on your way up and your legs change, there are potential deductions, right? As we were told at the FIG code, it's where you stop. So if I stop at 45, 0 to 15 is 45 to 30, right? It's from where you stop and come back. That's where the angles are. It's not from vertical. Does that make sense? Right? I mean, you're supposed to go to a handstand. What happens if you only go here and then you change direction? It's from here down. That's where the angle things hit. So you literally could be piked and get a 1/10 deduction. If that's as high as you got and then you change direction, that's only a 1/10 deduction. Now, there's a deduction for the pike, right? But it's the change of direction is the thing we're talking about here, right? The way I've created this PowerPoint is I've merged together the national and the JO. So when it looks a little bit more, less busy as far as those are my slides from the JO PowerPoint stuff, right? So that's where we're kind of going with these next couple of slides, right? So here's where we're going to talk into this distinction. What time we got? I got time. So think about what you need to do. The biggest approach now, we've talked about this a couple times, is it's 7 plus the dismount. That's the big change of what we do. The element group skills have to be within those top skills. Judges, again, and these are some of these are pretty repetitive, right? You count the highest value skills. You still choose equally valued skills to the benefit of the athlete. We talked about that, right? Again, you cannot go back out of those skills and pick up the element group. Level 8s still have their own element groups, right? The FIG has their 4. There's 4 different kinds of element groups for level 8. This thing here. I've provided you with, and again, I don't care if you use these or not, it's just the stuff I use, but these are my updated cheat sheets, right? So this is high bar, the element groups are you have to do an A value in bar skill, you have to do an A value half turn over grip, an A value over grip, half turn, and you have to do an A dismount. Those aren't the FIG element groups. You understand what I'm saying? So again, when you're doing element level 8s, you just have to recognize that there are different skills that are required, right? And a lot of the changes that were made in the JO program about composition have been further clarifying those things, making it more clear what they mean. For instance, some guys would do undergrip cast pirouette because it said you had to do a half turn from undergrip. Well, that's not the spirit of the thing. They want you to do a giant swing half turn. That was a clarification in this code. So now it has to come from a long hang half turn undergrip. Okay? Again, coaches are, when coaches figure out the rules, they're pretty freaking smart about finding loopholes, right? And that was one that everybody was using, and we were stuck with it, even though it wasn't the spirit of the rule. So let's look at some of the change here with respect to routines. This routine at the top, right? You look at this skill, right? We need to count. Here are the valued skills. How many skills are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 10 skills. How many do we get?
7 with the.
7 in a dismount, right? So when you're counting these skills as you go across, what you'll notice is there's here's your this is group 1, right? It's an A. Here's group 2, right? So he has 1, 2, 3. He would get all 5 of those skills. The challenge is, under the new rules, he's not going to get this group 2 because it's not in the top 7 elements that aren't a dismount. Okay? How do you know that's a group 2? How do you know?
That's how you have to mark it.
You better have written down what is this skill, right? If you don't know what the skill is, it's going to be very difficult to come back and say, well, which one of these A skills are it, or is it a B or an A? Which one? It's not in the top 7, right? It's important to be able to write these skills down. For us at the JO level, our saving grace is these guys aren't going to do Busnaris and all this other crazy crap at the top. You'll be lucky to see a D skill in most JO routines, right? So really concentrate on understanding how do you write down the D skills, right? I like to watch warm-ups, right? I like to at least see a little bit of warm-ups. So I know, I say, well, what the hell? I'll tell you the things that freak me out all the time because I do a lot of high bar. I can never remember the front release dismount skills. I can't. I can't remember it because you only see like 5 a year every year, and all of a sudden somebody's, oh shit, what the hell was that? So now I got to look. You need to, if you see warm ups, you know somebody's going to do that. First of all, you're now prepared, so I'm going to scare the shit out of you now, right? So you won't think he's flying, right? But you need to be able to write that down pretty quick, and you don't want to have to go to your code every routine to figure out what's going on, right? Any questions about that? I mean, are we good? These are just routine constructions. They've actually taken specific skills, right? In this skill, again, just to kind of cut to the chase, the side travel is the only level or element group 3 skill. It's an A. It's not in the top 7. He doesn't get element group, whatever the heck that is. 3. Gotcha. Yeah. All right. Is everybody cool with that? I think when we get to actually do some of these routines event by event, we'll see that this is actually happening and we have to pay a little bit of attention to it. Again, here is the front uprise skill, right, on parallel bars, right? Unless they can do a back uprise straddle cut catch, I don't know what else they're going to do for group 2. We'll have to figure that out, I guess, when the time comes, right? There's a level 8 skill. One of the things on floor, and again, I'll save this a little bit for Justin's talk, is there is a requirement that says that you must do a connected skill, right? But they also say you're allowed to repeat a skill. So can you repeat in connection 2 skills? Can you do a front tuck, or a front tuck, front pipe? They actually, when we get there, they're actually going to give us the rule so we can see it. I don't want to jump to the end, right? But you can repeat a skill as long as it was done in connection once. You can repeat it 1 time. Okay? And again, I don't want to beat Justin's stuff up. Stick bonus is on every event except for pommel horse. You don't have to worry about sticking pommel horse anymore. Execution bonus. If a routine is done with 8/10 or less deductions, they get a 1/10 bonus back for execution bonus. A change from last time, with one exception, all bonus skills get 2/10 bonus, optional. The exception is a jam to handstand on high bar gets 1/10. Everything else gets 2/10. Bob and I were talking about it. It turns out that once we start going through this and you see the bonus skills, most JO guys don't do bonus skills. They're not gonna do any of those skills. You're not gonna see many of them, right? Some guys at the very upper level might do one or two, but in general, I mean, they're really hard, right? There's no stuff like, well, you did a double pike on floor, so we'll give you 1/10 for that because we want you to do a tuck and a pike. You know, that crap is all gone now, right? So it's a little easier. That's a little bit more difficult. Only level 10s can do vault bonus. And the JD, the junior developmental optional guys, they don't get any bonus, right? Might be a little bit easier for us. Yes, sir.
If you get the execution bonus, does that go back into the E score, or do you record it as a bonus for the D score?
As a D.
I think it goes to start bound. It goes to start bound, so it'll go to the D score.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll go to the D score. Yeah. So can somebody, when somebody has a question, even because that's a good question, because you made me think about it. It's obviously going to go. I don't want to say it's obviously going to go to D, but if somebody can write down the question, somebody wants to take that responsibility, I appreciate it.
Okay, clean bonus skill.
So, the next, here are the JO dismount requirements. Level 10s, they have to do a C dismount. If they do a D dismount and stick it, they get a 1/10. If they do an E or better dismount and stick it, they get 2/10 stick. A C dismount gets them the full element group. A B gets them 3/10, and an A gets them 0 element groups. Level 9, B dismount, and then you know what? C is a 1/10, D or better is 2/10. They got to do a B. If they do an A dismount, it's a 3/10. If they do something less than an A, obviously there's no credit for that. Level 8, an A dismount is required, right? Just an A dismount. +1 for a B. C or better, you get 2. Full credit for an A dismount. If you do a non-fig A, you get 3/10, right? Best example I can think of this is like on parallel bars, if you do a Wendy dismount, right? Non-fig dismount, but it's definitely a dismount, you get an A, right? What happens if a guy does a back tuck off of high bar? So I think a stretch is an A, tucks and pikes aren't in the code, right? It's a non-fig dismount, right? It gets 3/10, it won't get the full value. We talked about spotting a lot, right? For me, I think this is critical to make sure coaches do the right thing, right? And just to talk about why this is an issue, there are coaches who coach kids that are at the elite international level. They don't spot high bar, rings, vault.
Yeah,
So
you
when
to
they
be-
have younger guys that come in, they forget and they walk away, right? Here's the rule, right? If on high bar, rings, and vault, they must spot. The question is where they have to be. It's your judgment as to whether they're in a place where they can spot or not. Okay? If this is the high bar goes that way, and they're standing behind the high bar, there's no way they can go through the high bar to spot, right? I will be yelling at the coach to start spotting, right? The rule is, if they don't spot, you take 3/10, you warn them. If they do it again, their kids are done for the day on that event. That's the rule. If you ever want to get asked back as a judge, you won't apply that rule, right? I will take the 3/10. I would never stop all the kids from competing, right? But the point is, if they do it a second time, I'm going to deduct 3/10, right? The first time I'll let it go. The second time I'm going to be much more strict about it, right? But I'm also going to be saying it loud enough that people know they're not where they're supposed to be, right? That's our job. right? Again, enough said. I mean, coaching is obviously important.
Larry, you get it casually at vault too, because they're lining kids up and they're saying, they're ready to go. No, get down here and
Yeah.
spot.
The question of where they have to be is, it's a question, right?
And the JO
On
code
vault-
does say that on vault, they have to be in a position to spot within an arm's length of the table.
So is that at the beginning of the table? Where it is, as long as they're in the ballpark, I'm happy, they gotta be there. That's your job, right, is to make sure they're there. We talked about the fig fall rules, we've already talked about that. Coaches are not supposed to talk to their kids in the routine, right? These are kids, right? I have never taken a deduction for a coach talking to a kid when he's on the high bar or something. I've just never done that, right? On floor, I have yelled at the kid to tell him what the hell to do next, right? He can't remember the compulsory and he's just standing there and coach ain't paying attention, so I'm like, it's a cartwheel, do a cartwheel. I just want him to get done, right? Don't apply that rule, just don't apply that rule,
You're
right?
shrinking my ROI.
There is no video in the JO program, okay? Save yourself grief. It is, you never look at it, ever, ever. Because as soon as you look at one, you've now opened that slippery slope that now it's a problem, right? For those of us who do the NCAA stuff, NCAA is allowed JO review. Internationally, they're allowed video review, right? Yeah.
Unless your head judge makes it.
Head judge have never made me do that. So
You can talk
he's,
against it.
he's been in that situation. But the rule is there's no video in the JO program. What else? In our wonderful country, JO, we do both things at the same time, D and E, right? NCAA level, we don't, right? There's a D judge, there's a couple of E judges. Internationally, there's a couple of D judges, there's a panel of E judges. So we have to understand that you're gonna have to do both things. As he'll talk on floor, now we have to time floor. We gotta figure out who's gonna be the timer, right? For those of you that have judged before, you know sometimes little Johnny's only 6 years old. Johnny barely knows numbers. He's flashing for you, right?
After 3 rotations, his interest is gone.
Yeah, so I mean it's gonna be different this year. We're gonna have some, and I'm telling you, the judge is not gonna be a person that does this. You cannot be asked to do all that crap and watch a stopwatch at the same time. It's just not possible. So, anyhow, the maximum score is 1.0. There's only one attempt at a routine allowed, right? The only exception is if they tear their grips. Then they can, however, if they tear their grips, they go at the end of the routine, at the end of the rotation, and they do the whole routine. They can't go change their grips, now it's been 2 minutes, jump up and finish the routine from where they tore off.
They can if they lie on the mat.
What's that?
But they can if they lie on the mat. For a minute.
For a minute. So,
Don't
there-
exaggerate.
but the,
As long as you toss them the new.
I got stuck on that at JO Nationals one year. A guy tore his grip, and the head judge, get some bunch of listen, head judge, the head judge says, no, go right now, just go get another grip, go up, and it was like a minute and a half. And he didn't make him start the routine over. He started from where he fell. He said, well, you don't take deductions for that. His grip fell, so he'll do that skill over, you know. I'm like,
It's not how it works.
That's-
It's not how
that's
it
not
works.
in the rules. And he goes, well, that's how we're doing it. I go, well, okay, do whatever we got to do.
Those rules are really just suggestions.
Yeah.
They're motivating.
For the compulsories, right? Slightly different rule things that we need to understand. The only difference is at the top. What every piece, if you look at every box of the compulsory things, every box is a numbered part, right? If you omit or miss a numbered part, the deduction's 1.0, right? Routine composition error. if you do the floor routine in a different order than it's supposed to be done,
Or direction.
it's a routine composition error, right? 5/10. Okay? I'm gonna take a break here in a minute, because I'm getting a little out of breath myself. There are 2 levels now of what's referred to as junior developmental. Last year they were divided by age groups. I don't know how the hell it's just junior developmental 1, junior developmental 2. Okay? Division 2, they have no element group requirements. Right? If I'm not mistaken, they do 7 skills, 6 skills and a dismount.
Yeah.
That's
6
what
and
they
a
do. Everybody else, 8s and above, it's 7 skills and a dismount. But developmental division 2 has no element group requirements. So how do you come up with a start value? It's just the D score, any connection they have. That's it. There's no bonus for these guys. Right? So that's their start value. And then 10 would be the E score. So-
That's for both divisions, not just Division
Division 1, they're required to do 3 FIG element groups.
Well,
One of
they
which
can
has to
up
do the
two.
dismount.
They're recognized.
They
So
don't- Yeah, 3 can be
Recognizing the
recognized.
start value.
They only have to do 3 of the FIG element groups, one of which has to be a dismount. Okay? Again, there's no bonus. There's no execution bonus. There's no stick bonus. There's no bonus skills.
No, I don't believe they have to do the dismount. They can do 3,
No, I think, yeah.
but they can, one of their element groups can be the
It's
dismount.
not true, like they get stick bonus. They get stick bonus, they don't get any kind of exceptions and they don't get any execution bonus. Because they start off at a 10-0.
That's right. No, it's 10-0 plus the D.
10-0 plus the D, right.
Again, all I can do is go by that. It said no, there's no stick bonus. So,
Okay, never mind.
so you have 6 value parts, 5 skills. This says 6 plus 5 plus a dismount. Dismount may be a non-FIG JO, right? All the skills can be FIG or non-FIG JOs, right? That's that JO element, no element group thing. It's 10-0 plus the difficulty. Again, there's no element groups. Extra swings are allowed, right? This becomes problematic for us that have been judging for a very long time. Because an extra swing is bad, right? You're not supposed to take extra swings. These guys are allowed to do extra swings, so it's a little bit of a problem. Right? For Division 1, the start value is the 10-0 E score, the difficulty, plus the element groups. It says up to 1.5. I thought I read earlier that one of those has to be dismount, but maybe I'm wrong. They just gotta do 3 of the 4. Okay?
But if they do 4, they still only get 1.5.
That's right. Yeah, they can only do 3. So let's look at optionals for these guys, some specific rules. The FIG rule about using all 3 parts, it's applied here, right? So if a guy does nothing but loops and he stays on the end, never goes to the other end, right? That's a deduction. That's a 3/10 deduction on Common Horse for not using all 3 parts of the skill, right? Of the event. On rings, they do not have to do a handstand. Not required. On vault, very specific what vaults they're allowed to do. A Yamashita is not in the code. It has a 1.6 value. Yamashita with a half is a 1.8. Front handspring, front pike with a half is as an option was a 3.6. JO development guys should not be doing that crap, right? They're going to do handsprings and the cartwheel things on like quarter on, half. You know, those are the things they're going to do soup tucks. They're going to do maybe a soup. They're not going to do hand double fronts. Let's
Their
hope.
maximum value is a 12.4 for JD.
Something like that.
Vault.
So that brings us to the end of this general stuff. Okay? I think we should take about a 10-minute break. That leaves us set up. Gotta stretch your legs.
I'm gonna get it.
Justin can
I gotta get it.
step in. No problem.
Right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I got a stopwatch.
Yeah,
I
it's
wanna
really
do
better.
a little-
I've been on fire.
I wanna do a little-
Watch out. Business center. We'll take the pen paper out of the business center.
We can get tablets if you want, those little tablets, we can
Yeah,
get as
but
many of
then
those as you want.
2 seconds, up to 2 seconds.
There's some up here.
Then
you
2
judge
to
the
5. And
You
then
go
1 to
back
5.
down on the symbol and write down what the
One,
one,
three,
three,
four.
are, like
For the
one,
deduction.
three, or
Up to
do you
2
just
seconds.
know?
I don't,
Up
I
to-
don't. When I go back, I convert the symbols to
Oh,
letters,
I can run it like a
right?
stopwatch.
But as I'm doing it, I am, once I get that group of letters, like now I know there's 10.
Yeah, somebody
I'll
has
go
to
back
bring
and
it
I
up.
will circle
That's
the element groups. So I gotta have 4 circles for this map and 3 others, I gotta have those circled. I don't write E1, E2, you know, I don't do that because I don't have time to do that.
But you do something.
I just gotta find 4, right? All I gotta do is, of those things that were done, I gotta find 4 in each element group. So right now, the dismount's easy, right? For most of it, you know, there's 3 is not as, 3 is substantially
Well, you
less
have to
difficult
know,
than
but
4.
if you don't do that, you only get to do 5 in each element group. If you have a hole in your system, that's gonna catch up to you.
Oh, I see.
So like when I do it is I have a line for symbols,
And then it changes.
I have a line for element groups, and then I have a line for letter value. And I have to make sure that those things are circled, but I have to see if they did 7 group 2s,
Well, I
we
mean,
only
that's-
count 5.
Yeah.
But then you write the deductions underneath that.
So the deductions are all,
Usually
right
with
next
the
to
symbol.
my deductions are symbolized as well, it's not just numeric value. The numeric value is indicated to me on how I do what I do. But I have angular deductions that are specific to my symbology. So I won't have a number there, but I'm like, oh, that's a less than 45, or that's greater than 45. Like I would know that because of the way I kind of design my own system.
I don't, I
Right.
don't.
But if you don't, like, that's the only hope. Most of the time, you won't have to worry about it because it helps you to do 5 or more and still be able to formulate a all-around strike value with 4 element groups.
Let me go just to correct you, because you know what you just said. The JO program, we can do as many element groups as you want.
Oh, it's only the fig.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Fig
don't
is
know.
the
No,
only.
you can only do 5.
That's what I thought. I thought it was
Not true.
5.
That wasn't true last year. You can do as many.
Oh, no, you're right,
You can do as
you're
many
right.
element groups as you
Because I
want.
counted it last year in
So-
one routine.
Okay.
so in
But
jail,
For JO, it doesn't
trained-
matter,
Yeah.
right?
but you're not gonna get a requirement if you don't do that one. But you're only doing 8 skills anyway, so if you do 5, 2 and dismount, you're done anyways,
And then
right?
they basically say, well, if you don't make
So,
the team, you're
At
gonna
the NCAA level, you don't need to worry about
anything
anything because they give you
Right, so
criteria.
they're actually seeing these
So
guys
you know
who
what the
are
routine's
reading.
supposed to
You know
be, so
sometimes
you
they're
know.
wrong.
Sometimes they're wrong.
Oh, sometimes they boost for a group 10.
See, what I do is, in fact, there is on this website that's available.
I mean, I do JS,
Especially because,
but if
for
I,
example, Ohio State picked
you
me
know,
up.
like,
So now
when the hell are you gonna ever get a chance to apply a fake concept if you don't ever do it?
I know.
You know what I mean? I train fake.
Which-
And then JOs, I'm like, it's easy.
Well, I did symbols last year to a point, but I kinda went over symbols.
I'll tell you all I mean, mine, I have, the root of it is pretty much fake, but there's certain ones that I don't do. But if you went and took the course, you would have to know why they do a triple squiggly. But reality is when you judge floor or something, like, I'll put a 5 over a 2. Anything more than a full, it becomes like a different symbology, cause I'm like, I'm not gonna fucking do this
Well,
3.5 times.
the problem with the fig thing is, I think it's counterintuitive the way you do it, right? Because the symbol for a half twist fig is this, which is a full, no, it's a half.
So you get more writing for less type of skill, so we get to see more of those opportunities.
You guys see,
Writing
not,
more
not,
for
yeah,
that.
not.
So I do, my half is, I do a C, it's a line, that's a half twist. This is a full. That's a full and a half.
That's why.
Double.
Yeah.
Double and a half.
Whatever works, it
It
doesn't
just makes,
matter,
it doesn't matter.
as long as you can do it fast.
And as long as it's not a test question. Because on the test question back then, it just didn't make any sense to me the way they did twisting
And
it.
if a guy to me does a back 2.5 right into a Rudy, now that's a tuck, that's a tuck. That's a laid out, like my root is a tuck. But if you were to do other things, that's gonna be hard to kind of catch up fast, but that's it. That's a bad.
He'll
That's
do
bad.
I think.
But that's my floor. But on high bar, you know what I mean, like anything more, you won't get it installed, cause you know, like if you hop it, then you get value, but the reality is, really it's floor where I just deviate from fit, and almost is hard, because if you're spindling,
One
a
question.
half or a quarter spindle, it's way more
What are they gonna do?
odds.
If I tend to move it.
And I don't drop eyes, like I don't drop eye contact at all, so mine's constantly moving. And like
It's not in the, you're allowed to do that, Jay. So that's a figure.
Right.
It's not,
You know what I mean? So
it's not
like,
even NCAA.
if you do a
Junior fig is
spindle,
different.
I say is get some of your
Okay.
college guys who actually have
From-
personalities.
a side travel.
Internationals are
That's what I'm saying. So
international.
get some of your
We're
college
taking the
guys.
JK compliance fig rules.
No.
That fig rule, write that down. I'm sure the answer is they don't care. I'm sure that's the answer. I'm sure. Good question. I hadn't thought about it because we're doing fig rules.
You know,
Does it
big
spec-
rolls are-
So,
Let's get to the vault and see if it
The point
specifically
is
says
that
that.
whatever
That would
you
be
do,
cool, but that would be.
I
you
can't
just have to make sure you know where it's
Lance, I'm
coming
not doing
from,
vault, so I
because they
didn't
can
pay a whole lot of attention to it.
yeah.
But he's doing vault, so when we
But
get
I
there.
would do that, like, if I
I
had
gotta get a
this,
drink of water.
and then there's like a height problem, right? Or there's a sheet.
If you guys go to the front desk,
That'll be
they
right.
do have soda there. It's like $2 for a soda at the front desk if you want soda.
And this is an A and 2, and this
How long
is
does
an
the
A
NCAA
and
basketball
1.
tournament go?
You know,
A lot of
Well,
games.
A
that's true.
and
Just to
1.
see.
So then
Judges
what I
don't
would
get
do
paid
is
for
I
it.
would circle those two things, and then we have those two elements. It'll be like that, but then I get to the end, and I'm like, alright, you have 2.0, and there's 2.4, and 1.4, and then I go to now maybe they have 24, and then there you go, there's a score. That's just the way I do it.
I've been all four brackets.
And then if somebody comes over, I can absolutely tell them, I go, especially in JO, I'm like, oh yeah, you did all 4 boxes.
Yeah.
So the same thing, instead of my element rules,
Yeah.
is the same as their bonus. So they did, and especially level 8s, I don't know what the number corresponding to what that is, but if there's a circle and I know that those are represented there, and this is represented in their D, you know, like that's the D is right there, so the D is a 4-4.
Years ago, they didn't just, you know, I mean, JO skills. I didn't know what it was. Remember I went to Discord and seen me big, just like I need to go back and hard height, go back.
The thing like on rings, to me, so that's it. If you do a double back within your team, well, you're not allowed to now. But that's a Yamawaki. Yamawaki Pike, I don't even do that anymore. Now I just go that and that. Okay, so that's my Yamawaki Yamawaki Pike, because you see a shoot ton. But if you do a double front, then you know that's what's going on. It's the same thing as unused. Back and down my own. So,
I mean, cause I never really looked at them, but it goes away with the foot.
yeah, I mean, like that's the same thing with a front giant, you know. That's a front giant, that's a back giant. You know, how do you do a shoot handstand or rings, or that's specific to you, like, it just tells me your components or just views. On high one.
You know, snow, stuff like
The
that.
point is they already see that that is a rule, that's a fake symbol, that's a fake symbol. Most of the time,
Yeah.
you do it, don't. So that's the twisting front foot.
So, major
all elite, but it's different versions of it.
And all of them.
There's
all
no
of them
way
are
to-
different. So if I were to, by accident do this.
Right, so you
No,
just
just
here.
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah. I think that's
So that's what I enjoy. So now
absolutely
I'm like,
everything.
all right,
So
you
everything
can
walk back down, keep your line
Yeah.
together.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's it.
And also
Yeah.
techniques for like getting
And-
someone to like no.
Yeah, and I know me, see, there's one together that's not
Around getting riled up and getting.
that's a, that's.
I mean, I say my team was loud, but I like the. But I was about to
Subset.
it was true, like you didn't know where he was coming from, you finished something.
I always.
There we go.
Symbols in my own home. You know,
Is the athlete
the idea that they cause such a cause. Or that's a whole twist.
Nothing should be violent.
Yeah, I like it. I just, like I said,
I
and it's going down the line. I didn't disassemble that much 2 years ago.
I was looking for that.
Up until this summer.
And now see, if you have
A
experience.
lot of my symbols were similar to so now, all they require you to do is submit.
Well, I don't, I
The
guess,
internet was like,
Yeah,
there were questions on the test with big symbols, but they were all things like this. What's that double front? They had two skills, they had a guy did a Kodak, plus Kodak. Sorry, what's the
symbols, you kind of tell by your symbols.
Where for me it's difficult, sometimes is on two things together.
It's a version to me, that's what I think on our club.
Yeah.
If they were, if it was a half to this. How's it connect? I had some trouble with it. I'm better now. It's 'cause I figured out how to do it. I always start my back hands off with an arm. So I always do the first skill is back with the arm. So if you have an arm, people from other teams come up with a bar, 4.5. Back salto with 4.5. They did another grip. That goes a whole half, and that had to be forward, right? So you don't have to write all that stuff. If I write an R down, right? If I do a hump, for me, that's a front handspring. They do a front handspring, that next spring has to be a front stop.
Yeah, that is true.
I don't like my brain, somebody else's brain.
But he's doing it in basic way.
And I did them last year.
He's very
That's the first thing I was able to be especially because that was the first
Yeah, our girls
sharp guys. Last 2 years ago.
they're
Very
kind of like,
sounds like
I think that's,
it's like you get away with the score, but they have honestly execution. But every time my chair came up to the ranks, it was it's never for me. It's always like 3 or 4 times.
But it's always.
It's not there for
I don't know about
the kids to count on.
yeah.
We'll versus anything on itself.
Really good relationship.
It's
Yeah.
The guys,
He's like,
But this
guy is
one of the best.
I've actually, it's
Yeah.
somewhere here.
Just tell them that it's out there available, it's on the website.
It's really
Yeah.
So I said, text,
Yeah.
printed it out, and forget my life. I don't know whether to embrace this or broke it.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
Program, somebody that makes sure that lower level kids, are you gonna have competitive class, do something like that. But for us to have to be able to evaluate that with
Amen.
Aiming,
And as long as you do the right goes down, you're, it's just in it's just another level.
That's what I'm saying. Because it's well,
they're doing good.
he goes to the next guy.
I haven't seen all of his
I remember
lives.
one meet, I was doing an actual workout, and I guess he never seen it. So, it's just about, he looks at me.
You ready, dude?
I don't even keep something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, you do what I do.
And I'm like,
Liam's doing well.
Yeah, Liam.
Yeah.
that is an
So what I will do for you, my friend, is,
This
let me
is.
see, I can stop this.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I didn't get